play.
So my name is Dr. Lindsey Migliore. I am the Senior Director of Gaming and Performance at Evil Geniuses. My title's changed like 4 times. I am a medical doctor by trade, but a couple years back, 5 years back now, started building the field of esports medicine. So I left traditional medicine about 3 years ago and started doing esports work full time. I started working with players and coaches on, the basics of health, and then got more involved in the esports business side of things. It turns out when you go in and try and get people to exercise and sleep a little longer, if there are bigger systemic issues going on, it's kind of like a Band-Aid. So started getting more involved on the business side, more involved with development and coaching curriculum and the soft skills, and more of like an athletics director type position. Ego and understanding of ego in that self-reflection process is really, really important, because you got to think, am I not doing this because I don't want to do it, or am I not doing this because of my ego? And everyone has ego, right? It's fine. I think being involved in esports, you have to have a high ego, especially if you're a player, especially if you're in the eye of social media so constantly. You have to think, yes, you are the best, because everyone else is going to constantly try and bring you down whenever you make a mistake on stage. But I think understanding of that ego and when the ego is talking is the important part. So you can say, oh, I'm only upset right now because my pride is hurt. So I'm going to take some time, reorganize my thoughts, and come back to this situation in a better space. So I completely agree with you that self-reflection is so essential, but also really difficult. So I'm glad that there's some assistance being provided by the Fit Gamer app. Until 5-10 years ago, we didn't even know your brain had its own waste disposal system. So there's something called the lymphatic system, and it takes gross stuff away from the corners of your body and digests it, basically. It's the reason why, not the reason, but it's one of the reasons why your ankles swell on the plane, is all the stuff is pooling in your brain, and this lymphatic system relies on the pumping of your muscles to drain the fluid away. Anyways, we didn't even know your brain had a lymphatic system until like 10 years ago, which is absolutely wild. I typically start with education on the basics of physiology, of biology, of psychology, and I go in an active learning environment and not teach them, but we discuss topics like sleep, exercise, nutrition, and we discuss the why, because I think we all walk around understanding certain things, but not knowing the reasons why behind it. We don't push the curtain aside, and thus we typically don't care, right? Like, we don't think about what's happening underneath, right? Recently, I've been stressing the importance of routines in our cognitive athletes. I love that phrase. Here's the routine you can pick from. Get it? Our bodies are intrinsically programmed to recognize patterns. So if you do the same thing every day prior to practicing, prior to playing on stage, that's going to trick your brain into preparing and getting into that flow state earlier. It's going to help your brain prepare for competition. It's going to, lower your performance anxiety, lower and get yourself zoned in. And that's one of the reasons why I really stress pregame routines. But I do it in that way rather than just saying, hey guys, here's a pregame routine. I think it's been a challenge, but it's gotten much easier in the past year for a couple of reasons. I think the space is evolving and the space is growing and emphasizing more of the health and wellness side of things, and players are more genuinely interested, which has been really good. There's this really good book by Phil Jackson. He was a really, really successful NBA coach, and it's called 11 Rings. And he was a big proponent of Buddhism, and he would talk about meditation. He would talk about the teachings of Buddha to his players, and he would say, there was 50 guys in the room on the team and support staff and whatever, and every time he started talking about it, 48 eyes went dull, right? 40 of them started thinking about something else, but he got one every time. Maybe he got two. And every time he spoke about it, someone else connected with it, and someone else listened. And so by the end of his career, he didn't reach everyone, right? Everyone didn't suddenly start listening to the teachings of Buddha, but a significant majority of them were positively affected by what he taught them, because he didn't stop. He persisted, and he continued to try and teach the things he knew were important. I think a big thing that we've done in probably the past 6 months that has significantly impacted how our players and coaches interact with our support services is selection process. So a big thing about esports is that in-game skills are super stressed, which they should be, right? If you're recruiting basketball players, you're going to want them to be able to shoot free throws and have good shooting accuracy and dribbling skills and defense skills. So it's not about ignoring in-game skills. It's about, when you have 5 players who are equivalent in skills, choosing the one who has the out-of-game skills you're looking for. But I think a huge barrier that these players have and these coaches have, I talked a little bit earlier, how the ego level is a little bit higher. It has to be. I don't think it's a bad thing. My ego level is a little bit higher than everybody else's, but it's inherently more difficult to try new things in front of other individuals because of that, especially something like jumping rope, right? Like, you don't know how to jump rope, you look dumb, right? Yeah. Like, you're whipping yourself in the face, you're tripping yourself, you're hitting other people. And teaching that, something as simple, I think, is really, really cool. Working out and exercising is intimidating if you haven't been around it before. It's, I've been in a gym since I was 10 years old because I've been playing sports my whole life. Having that ability to put your ego aside and try new things is really, really huge. Like, imagine if we didn't learn to walk until we were like 30, right? We spent the first 30 years of our lives, and then we finally got to that developmental age where we learned how to walk. Like, half of America wouldn't do it. There'd be Facebook groups about how walking was a myth, right? So put the ego aside and learn new things, I think, is a big one. A lot of things, looking stupid is sometimes, learn the best from that. But the other thing is, I would say you guys have your 5 pillars, which I think is great. I tend to, for physical health, tend to stress sleep, fitness, and nutrition. Sleep, exercise, and nutrition is basically the 3 things that I try and stress. You got to have one. You got to have one in order to just function. You got to have one that's good. You should really have 2 in order to be your best. And then if you can do 3 out of 3, that is how I think forward progress in your life and development happens. Sleeping 7 to 8 hours a night. For esports athletes, I tend to recommend 8.5 hours. I tend to tell my players, shoot for 8.5, shoot for 9.5, because you're going to hit 8.5 if you do. And then exercise, 15 minutes of exercise a day is what you want to try and hit. It's the bare minimum. Like you said, you just feel better. I just say keep a water bottle next to you, make it have a top that doesn't spill, and just sip on it all day. And then try and have 1 meal a day be mostly vegetables. One of my players came to me and said, hey, because we were working on an interpersonal issue with him and another one of the players, and he came to me and said, hey, based on what you taught me, my relationship with my girlfriend got better. And to me, that was like, it just gave me these like warm, fuzzy feelings and gave me that joy. And so when I'm like working 14-hour days, 7 days a week, I'm like, that's what drives me. And I really, really love it. Thank you so much for having me on and allowing me to talk about like all the joy I'm getting, because I kind of needed this. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Well played.